It began with a question that sounded innocent enough. Mom, why don't you put the apartment in my name? It'll make things easier for you later. Easier. That word lingered like perfume that wouldn't fade, pleasant at first, but cloying the longer it stayed. My daughter, Lila, said it with such casual confidence, her tone smooth as honey, her eyes avoiding mine. She always spoke that way when she'd already made up her mind. I was standing by the kitchen window that morning, sunlight pooling across the marble counter, the smell of coffee rising between us. Lila sat opposite me, scrolling through her phone, her fingers tapping the screen with that rhythmic certainty only the young seem to have. She was 32, sharp, ambitious, and impossibly self-assured. She had a way of speaking that made her words sound like plans, not suggestions. I wanted to believe her. God knows I did. She was my only child, the axis on which my life had quietly turned for years. After her father passed, it was Lila who made the world make sense again. She'd call twice a day, insisting I eat, checking the locks, booking my doctor's appointments. I used to joke that she'd become the mother and I, the child. But that morning, something shifted. The way she said, "in my name," it didn't sound like care. It sounded like ownership. "You know I trust you," I said, testing the words. "Of course, Mom," she replied, smiling that quick, bright smile that never quite reached her eyes. "It's just paperwork. You'll still live here. Nothing changes. Nothing changes." That phrase replayed in my mind long after she left for work. I stood alone in the silence of my apartment, the one I'd saved for all my life, where every crack in the wall and every framed photo told a piece of my story. I ran my hand along the wooden banister, remembering how her small fingers once clung to it as a child afraid of falling. Now, I wasn't sure which of us was afraid anymore. That night, I sat on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders, the city lights flickering through the curtains, and thought about what she'd asked. The idea unsettled me, though I couldn't yet name why. Maybe it was the realization that the home I had built, the one I thought would always be mine, could suddenly belong to someone else, even someone I loved. I didn't know it then, but that conversation was the beginning of something I would never be able to undo. I bought the apartment nearly 30 years ago, long before Lila was old enough to understand what sacrifice meant. Back then, it was just a cramped two-bedroom space on the edge of the city with cracked tiles and a leaky roof. But to me, it was freedom, a place I could finally call my own after years of moving from one rented room to another. I can still remember the scent of fresh paint on move-in day, the echo of my footsteps across the empty floors, and the way sunlight spilled through the balcony doors like a promise. Lila grew up within these walls. She learned to walk on the same floors I scrubbed late into the night. She studied for her exams at the kitchen table that still bears the faint scratches of her pencil marks. Every part of this home held a memory, her laughter, her tears, the life we built together after her father's sudden death. When her father passed, Lila was 15, too young to understand grief, yet old enough to feel the void. I did my best to fill it, double shifts at the clinic, late nights balancing bills, and mornings pretending I wasn't exhausted. I told myself it was worth it every time she smiled, every time she said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take care of you one day." And now, years later, she was trying to make good on that promise, or so she said. She visited more often these days, always with a brisk efficiency that made me feel both cared for and managed. She'd tidy the counters I'd already cleaned, rearrange things to make more sense, and remind me that things were different now. "You've done enough, Mom," she said one afternoon, her voice clipped, her hands already reaching for the stack of property papers on my desk. "You deserve to relax. Let me handle the rest." Her words should have comforted me. Instead, they felt rehearsed, as if she'd practiced them in the mirror before coming over. Still, I tried to silence the unease that crept in like a draft under the door. I told myself that she was only trying to help, that this was what good daughters did. After all, hadn't I raised her to be independent, to take charge of her life? But independence, I was learning, has sharp edges. That evening, after she left, I opened the drawer where I kept the apartment deed. The envelope was still there, heavy, sealed, and quietly powerful. I traced my name across it, feeling the weight of what it meant. Ownership wasn't just about possession, it was about identity, security, the life I had built from nothing. For the first time in years, I locked that drawer. What I didn't know was that the lock would soon mean nothing, and the signature that once protected me would become the very thing that put everything at risk. The day Lila brought the documents, it rained. One of those steady, whispering rains that turns the city gray and quiet. She arrived with her umbrella tucked under her arm, her hair damp from the drizzle, her expression brisk and businesslike. "Mom, I brought the paperwork," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "We can just get this over with before dinner." She laid the documents on the table, a neat stack of white pages that seemed to hum with importance. I stared at them for a long moment, my fingers tightening around my teacup. I had imagined this moment before, but I hadn't expected it to feel like this, like a slow unraveling of something I couldn't yet name. "Is this necessary, Lila?" I asked quietly. "Of course it is," she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're not getting any younger, Mom. If something happens to you, I'll have to go through endless legal trouble. This is just smart planning." Her words were smooth, practiced. I searched her face for warmth, for the flicker of the little girl who once cried when she broke my favorite teacup. But she wasn't that child anymore, and maybe I wasn't the same mother either. As I read through the document, the language blurred. Transfer of ownership, irrevocable, beneficiary. Each word felt colder than the last. "Do you trust me or not?" she asked suddenly, her voice soft but edged with challenge. It was the question that pierced me. Of course I trusted her. She was my daughter, the one I had carried, loved, and defended through every hardship. To say no would mean confessing something I couldn't bear, that my own child might not have my best interests at heart. So I nodded. I signed. Her smile was immediate, bright, relieved, triumphant even. She kissed my cheek and said, "You won't regret this, Mom." Then she gathered the papers, slipped them neatly into her bag, and left as the rain thickened outside. For a while, I sat in silence, listening to the rhythm of raindrops on the windowpane. The apartment felt different, heavier somehow, as if something sacred had shifted in its bones. I told myself it was just anxiety, just my imagination. But deep down, something in me knew I had crossed a line that couldn't easily be redrawn. Days passed, then weeks. Lila called less, her visits grew shorter, her tone more clipped, and when I mentioned small repairs or bills, she would say, "You'll have to check with me first now, Mom. Technically, it's my property." The words landed like stones. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the deed no longer mine, the silence pressing against my chest like a weight. I wanted to believe her intentions were pure. But somewhere between the ink drying and her voice hardening, I realized I had handed her not just the apartment, but a part of myself, and she was already changing what she owned. It happened almost quietly, the way most betrayals do. A notice slipped under my door one morning, thin and official looking. At first, I thought it was another maintenance circular, until I saw my daughter's name printed boldly at the top. Owner, Lila Warren. Beneath it, a short message: renovation work to begin next month. Tenants are requested to vacate temporarily. Tenants. That word struck like a slap. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands, and read it again, hoping I had misunderstood. But the meaning was clear. My name was nowhere. My home, the one I had scrubbed, painted, and filled with 30 years of memories, no longer belonged to me. I was, in legal terms, a guest in my own life. I called Lila immediately. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and distracted. "Mom, can I call you later?" "I'm in a meeting." "No, Lila. You need to tell me what this is." My voice shook despite my effort to keep it steady. "Why did I get a notice saying I have to leave?" She sighed, that deep, weary sigh she used when I asked too many questions. It's temporary, Mom. I'm renovating. The place needs work, you know that. You can stay with Aunt June for a while. I don't want to stay with anyone, I said. This is my home. Her silence stretched across the line, sharp and deliberate. Mom, she finally said, her tone turning cold. You signed the transfer. It's mine now. I'm just trying to take care of the property. The property. Not our home, not your apartment, just the property. I couldn't speak. The world blurred around me, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, all merging into a dull roar in my ears. When I finally found my voice, it came out small, almost pleading. Lila, how could you? Please don't make this difficult, she said briskly. I'll send movers next week. And before I could respond, the line went dead.